sure I'm in the right place. So there are two things that we typically go over here towards the end of the cohort. And by the way, congratulations to everybody on basically the finish line, getting there, right? This is really, really exciting. I'm super stoked for you. I know it's a lot of hard work. Now it's like building off that hard work into this next step. And I certainly want to help you in any way that I possibly can. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Maybe I'm going to exit out of this. And I am going to expand this. I'm sorry, like, I guess, I'm not a Zoom person. I hate to ask. Isn't there, I thought there was an easy, oh, there it is, share it right in the middle with green, you dummy. It's right there. All right, here we go. Game on and share. Okay, so there are two portions here as we're wrapping up the cohort. One is kind of talking with me. My goal here is to talk through not necessarily generic interviews, but more behavioral questions, interview prep, just to get you as comfortable as you're going to be, right, with interviewing, because it's something you're going to have to do. My goal is tomorrow as well for you to meet with one of our VPs of engineering. His name's Josh Crone, to talk through preparation for the technical interview, like what you can expect with either coding interviews or a technical manager, engineering manager, kind of what their approach is going to be, and the things that they're going to typically look for. Now, every hiring manager, of course, is going to be different, but the goal is to give you a good overview of kind of what expectations could be and how to best prepare for those. But today's interview, or excuse me, today's workshop is definitely more generic, right? The behavioral interviews, the situational interviews, just to make sure you have as much as you can. There's a couple of videos to go through here as well. Some of them are I think better than others, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. So if you have any questions, please do interrupt. I'm all for it, right? Interruptions are good, maybe, if I can get going. All right, so the different types of interview scenarios, and some of this is going to be duplicated throughout, so but slightly different in regards to how we're positioning. The different types of interview scenarios, obviously you're going to have your phone interviews, your video interviews, or your live interviews. Things are different today than they were when I first built this presentation, right? Because now we've got a lot of different things going on, right? There are many organizations that are still operating fully remote, right? In person doesn't really matter. Video is the norm, right? When it comes to interviewing. So we'll have to kind of amend or talk through some of these, but these are your basic, hey, this is the initial interview that you can expect. The phone interview, right? A video interview or a live interview. The phone interviews, these aren't as often as they used to be, right? This used to be the way that it always happened. Now we got more videos, but these things are always important. As you're interfacing with recruiters, right? Or interfacing with hiring managers, make sure that you are clear on the details and expectations of what to have, what you're walking into. What are we looking to accomplish, right? What are the times? What's the channel? Let's just to make sure it's all locked down and you're comfortable. Even if it is on the phone, make sure that you are actually dressed for the part. That seems silly, but it's true, right? Make sure that you are prepared for an interview. You feel like you're going to go to an interview versus, oh, shoot, I need to make this phone call and talk to someone about a potential job. It actually does put you in an appropriate mindset and could put a better foot forward. Definitely make sure you have a good quiet connection and you're in the right place, right? Now, this goes for both phone interviews as well as video and live. This is really, really important. There are times where you're going to have to take an interview from a situation or environment which might not be the best. Try to avoid those. But when it does happen, right, like make sure that you're as quiet as you can be. Like I had an interview last week where somebody actually took the video interview, I had a panel interview. They had 3 hours. They were meeting with folks on my team from the lobby of their current employer, right? That building, a little awkward, right? He wasn't able to be himself through that interview. So try your best, right, to find yourself in the right situation. If you can't be, just let people know, right? Things happen, things come up, right? That, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't plan on having to come into the office today, right? Or whatever the hell it was, right? Just make sure that you're forthcoming and honest, right? Otherwise, you could create a difficult situation. Try to smile, obviously, not like in a, put on your best face, but try to become approachable. This goes back to one of the first things that we talked about at the start of the cohort in regards to preparing your social media profiles. Make sure you have the appropriate picture, right? Same type of thing. Make sure that you're smiling, right? Make sure that you seem approachable versus someone that's not. I actually have, no, I can't actually say something. There was an interesting email address that someone had attached to their resume. It's like, huh, I don't know if I would normally engage somebody with that email because it doesn't seem like they are the best person, right? So again, know the details that someone is probably going to be looking at. But most what you're going to come across these days are live video interviews, right? Either initial or deeper into process. These are things that you definitely want to make sure you have considered, right? Get used to looking at the camera, right? I often look off screen, right? I've got like a second screen over here that I'm looking at. I sometimes look over here to the side where everybody's in a panel. Try to remember looking at the screen, looking at the camera, because that's where people can see you, right? While you might not be making direct eye contact like in a normal situation, try your best to look directly into the camera. Make sure you do have good light, right? You don't want it to be too dark. You don't want to be too light. You don't want to be backlit. You want to be able to be seen. And then as well, expect some snafus and delays. It's going to happen, right? It always happens. Technology is a wonderful thing. It is far from perfect, right? So be prepared for when that happens, either to maybe jump off and get into a different call, to log off and log back on, whatever it is. Definitely be prepared for those types of instances. Hopefully that all makes sense. As it's kind of a start for the day. Obviously these are further down the line of the different scenarios that you can come across. This is a big one. And I would say this actually carries over to phone as well as video as well. Be on time, right? There's nothing worse than being late to an interview, but not too early, right? Like on phone and video, you actually have a little bit of leeway because chances are the interviewer is going to come on right at time. However, if it's an in-person interview, showing up 30 minutes early, that's too early, right? Because that creates a little bit of an awkward situation. The interviewer might not be ready. There might not be somebody to quote unquote keep tabs on you or entertain you at the front of the office. If you are going to be attending an in-person interview, my suggestion, now it's much easier, right, as the world has kind of opened up a little bit, but to go to a coffee shop around the corner, right? So you know that you're going to be there on time, right? And then when you're 15 minutes from the actual start time, start your walkover, right? To be there, 5 minutes or so beforehand. There's no reason to be any earlier than that. It can create a little bit of awkwardness if you can. Bring copies of your resume. It's probably less important today than it used to be, but I do think it is worthwhile just to have a couple of copies just in case, and definitely know who you are meeting. This is for any interviewer. If it is a phone, if it's a video interview, or if it's in person, know who you're going to be talking to, so you can do a little bit of research to understand who the hell they are. In panel interviews, which do still happen, I actually conduct panel interviews. They're usually 2-on-1. I want a couple people to have different lines of questioning throughout that interview, right? But same thing. You want to understand what you're walking into, right? Know what the format is. Know who's going to be participating, and know kind of what to expect as much as possible. Try your best to read interviewers, phone, video, whatever. Definitely try to see the interactions they're having amongst themselves as well as with you, and use those as cues, right, on how you're possibly answering questions or moving things along. Does all that jive make sense? Cool. All right. So mentally preparing for the interview process. I don't think there's many people in this world that say they love to interview, right? It is mentally exhausting, right? It's emotionally exhausting too. And certainly if you're on an active job search, right? Like I talk to people all the time, like it's a full-time job, right? To look for a job. So, it is a little daunting. However, you do want to make the appropriate investment, certainly if it's an organization or a role that you're very interested in. So, they do estimate, right, that for active searches that you're going on, that to make an appropriate level of investment. It's actually about 4 hours per interview. Now that's per organization. That's not per discussion, of course, right? But to understand as much as you can about the company, to prepare your talking points and how your background very much aligns to it. One of those things that you're going to have to get comfortable with, and we talked about this again at the beginning of the cohort, is your personal brand, right? Getting comfortable talking about yourself. This is a great video, and I think that it is definitely worthwhile watching. I'm not going to ask you to watch it right now. We got a couple of others that I think are a little bit better use of our time, but I'll be sharing this link. Definitely take a look at this. But building your personal brand, and not only building your brand, but being able to talk about it, right? This is a very, very big thing. You're talking about yourself in the interview. Your resume, it's you, right? The discussions at the interview, it's about you, right? It is bi-directional. You definitely want to understand a little bit more about the organization as well. However, they're asking about you, right? You need to be prepared to talk about that. All right. So types of interview questions and techniques, right? This is there are the generic questions, right? What are your greatest strengths? What are your greatest weaknesses? This is a discussion, right? Around what are your greatest strengths? How to answer this question without seeming ho-hum, like, if you will. So we're going to go ahead and watch this one real fast, assuming my internet connection works out.
So you have a job. It's a little bit more complex than you think. The interviewer is asking this question because they want to see if your strengths and accomplishments align with the position. So you want to prepare as much as you can ahead of time. Revise the answers I'm about to give to you to fit the position you are applying for. The responses you'll learn today are a great starting point. However, you'll want to tailor them slightly to fit your needs. So let's jump into it. Step number 1 is to do your research. Before you can properly answer any interview question, you need to find out everything you can about the position you are applying for and the company you are applying with. Research the company's website, review their LinkedIn page, evaluate their activity on social media, read the most recent articles the company has published, read articles that have been published about the company. Doing this will help you find out what problems the company is facing and will help you better tailor your interview responses. Step number 2, make a list. You want to review the job posting very carefully and make a list of the qualifications, the experience, and the skills needed for the position. For example, you might find that the company is looking for someone with analytical skills, such as data analysis or critical thinking. Or you might find that the company is looking for a leader and they want skills in relationship building or someone that can provide constructive feedback. Either way, you need to make a list of the most important qualifications listed in the job posting. And with this list completed, you're now ready to move on to step number 3, pinpoint your strengths. This is where you'll evaluate your career accomplishments as they relate to the position. Next to each item on the list you made in step 2, jot down a sentence or two about how you match up with the skills, the experience, or the qualification listed. Your sentence or sentences should detail specific ways that you've excelled at these items through work, education, or volunteer experience. Make sure the sentences that you jot down show some type of quantifiable result. Step number 4 is to narrow it down. You won't have time to discuss all of your strengths. Pick just 2 or 3 that you can talk about and put in a career story format. The better you can show how your strengths relate to the position, the higher chances of you receiving a job offer. And if you're interested, I made a video all about questions that you can ask an interviewer during your interview. I'll go ahead and link it up in the YouTube card right here, and then I'll also place it in the description below. So let's review some sample answers that you can give in your next interview to address the question, what are your greatest strengths? Here's the first one. My greatest strength is my ability to lead and direct a team. As a marketing manager at company XYZ, I worked closely with my team members to develop an infrastructure that increased increased productivity by 20% in just a few months. The systems we put in place were later implemented by other teams because of the results that were achieved. Okay, here's another sample answer. I really enjoy writing new and innovative content. In my previous position, I had the opportunity to compose content for our company's website, employee training manuals, and press releases. In fact, I was recognized by senior management for being able to quickly publish easy to follow materials that produced results. Hey, and if you haven't yet had the chance to see the video that I made about how to answer the popular question, why do you want to work here? Make sure you take a look at that one.
All right. So there's some good stuff in there, right? There's obviously some things that aren't fully relevant to you specifically, but it is a good idea to understand some of these things. One of the things that I definitely want to throw out as a takeaway real fast is the job description is one thing, right? But we all understand that job descriptions are basically alphabet soup, right? They're typically going to be anything and everything under the sun that an organization says they want, but probably not everything is going to be necessary. So our goal is throughout the interview process to really start gleaning what is necessary. What are the things? And some organizations do a really good job at this, to where the job description isn't, I need 4 years of this, I need 2 years of this, I want leadership experience, I want a strong communicator, right? Like the goal is throughout each one of your interviews and each one of your steps to really start gleaning what is going to be necessary. That first engagement that you have with the recruiter, what are the biggest gaps? What are the actual expectations? Where is this role going to have the biggest impact? And you're preparing yourself as you get those answers, hopefully, right? As you actually get answers, again, hopefully, right? To prepare for that next step, right? So as you're talking to that next person, you know that XYZ company, you know what, they're tackling a huge monolithic application that they're trying to redo, right? Like this is a big issue. This is a big problem for them. And these are the areas that they're really struggling, right? And this is how you and your background are going to be able to make some contributions, right? To get over the hurdle. So, you know, those are the types of things that you really want to start looking at, and those are going to be your strengths, right? Again, you're understanding where exactly their gaps are. You find your personal attributes or capabilities and align those to their gaps, right? All right, cool. I'm not going to keep talking because we got a lot more stuff to get through. All right. So this is another one, right? What are your greatest weaknesses or your biggest weaknesses? This question still does get asked quite a bit. This is actually a really good one. This is an engineer that's looking to develop an appropriate answer here. Some of this I agree with it, some of it's not, but it does give you a good understanding of like what is a good approach and what potential answers are and how they can be viewed by your interviewer as you try to answer this question. Again, like I hope people don't ask this super generic question anymore, but they do, right? So we'll go ahead and listen to this gentleman real fast.
Hi, this is episode 17 of Prondos. I'm your host, Jordan Hudgens. I'm a Ruby dev and the CTO of the DevCamp platform. On Tuesdays, I cover various stages of preparing for a coding interview. And today I'm going to talk about the best way to answer the question of what's your greatest weakness. To be 100% honest, I'm not a huge fan of this question, because to me, it's a lose-lose type of scenario where if the applicant says a true weakness and is completely honest, they probably won't get the job. But if they lie and they just make something up that's not true, it's going to be evident very quickly. However, throughout the years, I have been asked this question before in interviews, so I thought it'd be a good one to prepare for. Since I've been on both sides of the interview chair, both being the applicant and also being someone who is hiring for a team, I wanted to put together a comprehensive list of the worst ways to answer it, why, and then the best ways to answer this question and what that will tell the interviewer. Here are some bad answers to your greatest weakness. A bad answer is saying that you have a hard time saying no. This will say that you're weak and will take on too many projects, typically resulting in poor performance. The next way to answer this question poorly is to say that you have a hard time staying on a single task. This means you should probably either learn how to focus or that you should be an entrepreneur. Working for a company usually means long hours on repetitive tasks, and if someone is bouncing from project to project, they're not going to be a good asset to the team. Another poor approach to answering this question is saying that you can be arrogant. I had a professor in grad school, Dr. Richard Gelfond, who's one of the most brilliant computer scientists I've ever known, who said this about arrogance. Being arrogant occasionally doesn't matter, but it's never good. An arrogant employee won't be able to work well with others and will have a hard time taking correction or learning anything new because they already know it all. Now let's go over some good strategies for answering the greatest weakness question. One answer would be to say that you can be slow to take action. This is an interesting answer because it could be a bad approach if you leave it at this, since it might tell the interviewer that you are timid, which would be a poor character trait. However, if you follow it up by saying that you are very detailed and that before you start a task, you want to have a clear strategy for how to move forward, that is an employee I want to have on my team. Another good approach would be to say that you can be overly critical on yourself. This will tell the interviewer that you care about your work and that doing it well is very important to you. Make sure to follow it up with how you're working on yourself and that you're still working on being a craftsman at your work, but to not get too down on yourself for irrelevant reasons. Another good answer could be to say that you have a tendency to be quiet. This is one of my favorite things to hear, assuming that the individual follows it up by saying that they can be quiet because he or she thinks that it's more important to listen to all of the details of a project or challenge before giving an answer. This tells me that the individual is going to be detail-oriented and won't miss key items because they were too busy thinking about what they were going to say next. I hope these strategies help you properly answer the "what's your greatest weakness" interview.
Okay, cool. So what I want to add on there is, number one, that is a kind of a bogus question, right? But what the interviewer should be targeting isn't what the weakness is. Like, it really honestly isn't. And if you look at the difference between how he's talking through, how this specific gentleman was talking through good answers or bad answers, or bad answers versus good answers, as far as in sequence, the good answers had strong clarification or follow-up, right? And that's really what an interviewer should be looking for. It's like, I could give two hoots what you're weak at. I really honestly could, right? But what I'm going to be interested in, number one, do you identify it as a weakness, right? And what are you doing to fix it, right? Or how are you overcoming it, right? Like, I don't care. We all have weaknesses. I am not the best multitasker. I am not, right? Like, I am trying my best. I'm taking additional classes. I'm reading books. Like, I struggle sometimes making sure that I'm going through appropriate prioritization. But at the end of the day, I get everything done that I want to do, right? That's a known weakness. I got to be able to talk through that, right? You got to be able to talk through yours as well. It's less about the weakness and more so how you're looking to address it and make it not a weakness, right? Because that's what you should be looking for if you're an interviewer asking that type of question. Hopefully that makes sense. Generic interview questions. All right. So what adjectives would you use to describe yourselves? These are all things that I am sure that you could do, right? If someone were to ask the question, hey, how would you describe yourself, right? Again, if I were to ever ask such a silly lame question, which I don't think that I would, but people do, you want to talk about the attributes that make sense to that organization. Again, going back to the research that you've done on this company that you love, this job that you want, what do they want, right? They're going to tell you that in their job descriptions. They're going to tell it on their careers page. They're going to talk about it if they have a culture page. Like, and you've got these attributes, right? In your past experiences, there's going to be instances that you can use to drive home these specific adjectives as an example, right? But these are things that are very, very important. The only thing that's not on here, right, that I think is really key is if you can call yourself a great communicator, right? Organizations are always interested in finding strong communicators because that's often the gap, right? People aren't able to communicate up or down a stack, right? Or across teams or collaborate. Communication is a pretty big skills gap for a lot of folks. So if it is something, don't blow smoke at anybody, right? They'll uncover it. But if it is something that you could use to describe yourself as a strong communicator, definitely add that in here. But these other adjectives, and obviously the little clarifications afterwards, very worthwhile. These are good things that organizations want to hear, right, about prospective employees. Why do you want to work here? Again, same thing. Hopefully this doesn't get asked repeatedly. However, if it does, this question and other generic interview questions outside of maybe, for the most part, you want to try to be consistent, right? Like, just like you might ask every interviewer, excuse me, why do you work here? What's your favorite part, right? You should be consistent on why you want to work here with, if that question comes up across multiple people, right? It is always good. However, what it does, right, is it does show that you've done some research and you understand the organization, what the role is, how it aligns, or you're trying to uncover those types of things. You should know these types of things, right? Again, these are the attributes, these are the items that should be important, right, to you as you're making your search. Now, obviously you want a job. We all want jobs. But there are other components to taking that next role that should be very important. And some of these are ways to uncover that, right? This question here, keep the focus on the employer or statement. It's about what you can do for the company. It's totally true. This is probably the most aggressive employee or candidate market that I've ever seen in my entire career. I've been doing this for 20 years. You're entering the workforce at a very good time. But show what you can do, right? Understand what they need and try to align that as best as you can. Answering hard. This is actually a pretty good one too. We're going to listen to this real quick. I like this one. I like Work It Daily, by the way.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Ariella from Work It Daily, and today I'm going to share with you the #1 secret to answering hard interview questions. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe. Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Ariella from Work It Daily, and today I'm going to share with you the #1 secret to answering hard interview questions. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment below. Okay, let's get started. For a lot of people, interviews are extremely nerve-wracking. I mean, what if you say the wrong thing? It can totally cost you the opportunity. It's important to bring up relevant, clear examples that prove that you are a fit for that job. But if you have a hard time remembering relevant examples during an interview, I've got an interview hack for you. Create a running document of examples that you can bring up during an interview. This is helpful because it can help you prepare for that interview. So you can review those accomplishments before you go into the interview, rather than have to sit there and figure out what examples you're going to use when the interviewer asks the question. So what kinds of things should you be putting on this doc? Here are a few. Quantifiable accomplishments. Quantifiable accomplishments tie your accomplishments with numbers or results, and these results prove that you offer value. Remember, numbers equal results and results equal value. Keep track of your quantifiable accomplishments so you can use them both in your resume and your interview. Challenges you've overcome. Think about the challenges that you've had to overcome in order to get that promotion, work with that difficult coworker, or get that client. Knowing this is extremely important, can actually help you with your examples during an interview. Employers want to know these kind of stories. So think about them, write them down, and put them in your document. Stories that showcase your enthusiasm for work or that reinforce your character traits. What makes you so enthusiastic about your work? Tell a story and be specific. Document those real examples as they happen. These kinds of real stories will set you apart from those generic interview answers that other candidates have. These stories are unique to you and your experiences. For example, you don't want to just tell them that you love helping people. You want to show them by sharing a story. This story should showcase why you love helping people, and it gives the employer an example to work off of. Showing enthusiasm through these stories is an essential part of the interview process. It allows you to showcase your passion for the industry, and it allows you to demonstrate your value. So whenever you have a great accomplishment, a great story, or a great example you feel like you'd want to share with an employer, jot it down, put it in your running document. It'll help you later. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment below. I'll see you in the next video. And remember.
So that is spot on, right? Like, I think a lot of these things are important. And we talked about this as we were going through kind of resume prep, right? And thinking through your past experiences and trying to position yourself. I'm a huge fan, right, of the STAR method, right? Or the SMART method, which is another way to think about it. Like this is super important, right? As you're thinking about how you're going to position yourself on your resume, as well as you're answering questions to any sort of interviewer. The big thing, and I think that woman really hit on it, right, was the quantifiable results. Like people want data. Like I do not want a regurgitation of a job description on your resume, nor as an interview question. I want to see what the hell you did, right? What did you actually do? What was the action? What were the results? That is what I care about, because that's what makes impact, right? That's what affects a company's bottom line and moves the needle, right? Like, oh, I developed 1,000 lines of code. Who gives a shit, right? Honestly, unless I know what those 1,000 lines of code did, right? Maybe it was 500 lines more than what you needed, right? Like I have no idea, right? But really understanding what the situation is, what the task was, right? What the action was, and what were your results. These are the things that are really, really important, right? So I do like the idea of, as you are going through your career, as you're recounting your past experiences, to really think back to specific stories, right? Specific instances, specific actions that you can lean on, right? As you're being asked questions, because every interview, I shouldn't say every, most interviewers and most organizations are going to want specifics. And if you have them at the ready, not necessarily rehearsed, but yeah, rehearsed, right? Then you're going to be in a better position, right? And it's going to be roll off your tongue much easier about how you can make impact at that specific organization, right? Preparing for your interview. I'm going to try to go through some of these. This is a weighty one, right? But to go back, these are things that you want to know depending upon the organization. There's so much public information, right? Understand the mission, the vision. Make sure you're aligned, right? Like maybe you don't want to work. Maybe this company tests on baby animals and you hate that, right? Like whatever it is, like understand the company, the mission, the vision, right? Is it a company you want to work for, right? Know their size, know their finances. Like are they publicly traded? Do they have earnings calls? That's a great way for you to get information. Again, if you have time, if you're interested, it shows interest, right? In understanding a little bit more of the organization. Know their clients, know their troubles. Who were there any big wins that they recently had? Check Glassdoor. I'm not a huge fan of Glassdoor overall. However, there's truth in Glassdoor, right? Like, like you could typically, cross out the fives and the ones, right? The stuff, the meat in the middle, that's true, right? On the whole, take a look, understand what people are saying, right? There's good data on there. There's a lot of people that go there. So take a look, understand. Hey, I understand the past 3 months, you had 10 bad reviews, like what's going on, right? Or 10 good reviews or whatever the heck it is, right? Bringing that up again shows interest in the organization and make sure that you are aligned, right? Know the structure of the company, the folks that are there, right? The location of offices. Are they working mainly remote? Are they hybrid? Like what are the expectations near and long term in regards to that working relationship with consumer or their employees? Key competitors, check out their press blog, right? Press releases and things like that. These are all things, right, that'll give you a better handle on who that company is. Prepare your background. Like this goes back to some of the things we just talked about, right? Understand the open position. All the conversations that you're having, specifically the initial ones that you're probably having over the phone or via video before you go on site or meet, have a panel interview or final interviews, are to get a better understanding of the role in the company and how you can fit. Always glean information from those conversations to make sure you're more prepared for that next interview, right? One of the things that Josh will talk about tomorrow, hopefully, I'm fingers crossed that he'll be able to make it, Unger, I hope, right? Is each interview, right? Like we do technical coding interviews, for instance. It's not pair programming, they're guided technical interviews. Like as we're going that, you're working with another engineer, right? They're going to be asking, like, well, what are you thinking? Have you thought about this, right? Like, how do those things play off of each other? Are you listening to what I'm trying to say and letting me guide you towards maybe a better or more efficient solution, right? So you don't go down a rabbit hole that you should not have, right? Again, listen, try to pick up on cues in each one of your conversations to better prepare for your next conversation, right? What makes you unique? Why? Like, why are you good for this role? These are generic to some extent, but prepare your background. Again, know the role, know the organization, know yourself against what those gaps are, right? And figure out how you align, right? There's this comment about social sweeps, or, any recruiter, hiring manager is probably going to check you out on social media, not just LinkedIn, but check you out and see what Google turns up. Oftentimes that could be Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is, right? Just make sure, right, the things that you have out there that are publicly available are okay to be publicly available, right? You want it to be as neutral as possible to not put yourself in a bad situation, right? And possibly prevent you from next steps. Seems like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised. So this is a big one. Every interview that you go on, even if you, like, let's say, for instance, you go in for an interview tomorrow and you're scheduled to meet 3 different people, 1 hour each. Every single one of those interviewers, you should ask questions. Every single one. Don't come to the second or third interview and say, you know what, I asked all my questions in the first interview, or I don't have anything else. You're missing an opportunity to get somebody else's perspective, right? It is important to get perspective. It should be bi-directional. This is a great video talking through how you need to prepare to ask questions of the person that you're talking with at that company. And I do love JT O'Donnell. I think she's awesome.
Hey there, it's JT and welcome back to Work It Daily. In today's video, I'm going to give you 8 smart questions to ask hiring managers in job interviews. But before I do that, I just want to remind you to click the link below to subscribe and hit the bell to get instant notifications every time we create new career content to help you get ahead. All right, so what do you do when you're in an interview and we get to that end where the hiring manager looks at you and says, do you have any questions for me? Well, of course you do. In fact, it is very important that you ask questions. I want to tell you that recently an employer I know reached out to me frustrated and said, I hate when I ask that question and the person says, no, everybody's really nice. I think I'm okay. That person, he told me, does not get hired. And the reason for that is that they have real concerns if you aren't asking questions, if you aren't doing your due diligence, and if you aren't having enough value in yourself to ask some clarifying questions to make sure that this place is the right place for you. Remember, we always tell you here at Work It Daily that you are a business of one, selling your services to an employer, and you want to make sure that it's a good partnership. So to do that, you've got to ask questions to make sure that this is the right place for you. It's like kicking the tires or looking under the hood to make sure that you're making a good investment. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the 8 questions you should be asking in your next interview. So before I break down the 8 questions, I'm going to tell you that they fall into 4 categories, and we call them the 4 C's. Now, by covering off on these 4 C's, you're going to make sure that you're asking all the questions necessary to make a good decision about this employer. And those 4 C's are connect, culture, challenges, and close. What do I mean by that? Well, connect simply is you connecting to that hiring manager, to that person that you'll be working with. You want to ask some questions to help you bond in the interview. As far as culture goes, you want to make sure this is the right corporate culture for you. Does this company believe and have values and go about business in a way that you respect and that you trust so that you can put your best foot forward? With respect to challenges, you want to know what's keeping them up at night so that you can make sure these are the kinds of challenges that you actually want to work on and leverage your skills to be successful at. And then lastly, close. You want to end this interview, this conversation on a high note. You want to leave very clear in what the next steps are. So once we know the 4 C's, it gets really easy to create questions that we can ask in the interview to make sure that we're getting the information we need. And that's what I'm going to show you next. So we're starting with connect. And the first question you should always ask in an interview is, how did you come to work here? This is an opportunity for you to bond with this individual by learning how they got hired by the company, what drew them into the company, what made them decide this was a great place for them to work. This is going to give you a lot of insight into their own decisions and what they're like as a worker. The second question is, what do you love most about working here? It's really important that you ask a positive question that lets them talk about all the things that they love about the employer. This is going to be a great chance for you to bond and share a love for the things that are great about working at this company. Plus, you're going to be able to evaluate whether or not these sound like things that you really care about. Remember, these questions are designed for you to get insight into whether or not this company is a good fit for you. So while they're very positive questions, it's also giving you a chance to evaluate whether or not it's a fit. The second C is culture, specifically corporate culture. And the 2 questions you're going to ask here are around individuals that have been hired at the company. The first question is, Tell me about the most successful hire you've made recently. Why has that person been very successful in their role? This is going to help you understand who is being recognized in the organization as a high performer. And you want to listen carefully. Let me give you an example. If they tell you about a person who came in and worked 80 hours a week and took everything that they had to do and worked with no budget and really was able to knock it out of the park, does that sound like a place you want to work? Does that sound like a place with work-life balance that has their ducks in a row? No. So if they're recognizing that as a good hire, then you know this probably isn't the right place for you. Now, the second question you want to ask is the polar opposite. Tell me about a hire recently that didn't work out. Why did they fail in their role? And once again, you want to listen closely to the answer because we want to see if the traits or characteristics of that person who failed sound like yourself. If you don't think you can be successful there, if this person sounds like they really couldn't have ever won in their job, then you're going to know that this isn't the right place for you. Now, the third C is challenges, and specifically the challenges the company is going to be facing in the coming year. So that first question you want to ask is, tell me about the biggest challenge you think the company will experience this year, and how will this job help to overcome it? What you're doing there is showing them that you understand you're a business of one, you're a service provider, and that what you're going to do is help them solve a problem and alleviate a pain. So by asking them what that pain or that problem is and how you can help solve that, you're really sending a message to them that you understand your role if you get hired. The second question you want to ask regarding the challenges is around performance. How will I measure my own performance to ensure that I'm having a positive impact on this challenge? Once again, you're taking full ownership of your work, of your effort. And by telling them that I understand that I'm supposed to do that, you're sending a clear message to them that you really will be accountable for your actions. And that's a great selling point there. At the same time, though, if they come back to you and say, well, there's no real way to measure and we won't have any idea of whether or not you're making an impact, that would be a huge red flag to you, because you're going to want to be able to do that in order to get a promotion or get a raise. What kind of company can't measure your impact? That's a sign of a company that you probably don't want to work for. So you can see again why these questions are really important. Not only do they set you up well with the employer by showing that you know what you're talking about, but it also is giving you some key insight into whether or not you want to work there. Now, the fourth and final C is about close, and that's how to properly close out this conversation. So the question that you want to ask, and this is going to sound a little crazy, but I tell you, it really works, is if there were some skills or experience you wish I had that would make me a better fit for this job, what would they be? This is your polite way of asking if they feel you have any shortcomings or if there is something deficient about what you've presented to them today during the interview. This is a chance for them to call out and explain any certain skills or experience or things that might make them hesitate in hiring you. And so asking this question shows that you understand you're not a perfect candidate, but that you do want to know what you could have done better. By the same token, if they do share something with you, you now have an opportunity to say, oh, but I didn't share this experience, or maybe I didn't tell you about this skill set that I have. It's a chance for you to overcome that objection, maybe realizing that you didn't give them everything they needed to hear today. So that's a really important question to ask. Now, that last question is, what are the next steps in the process? And that's because you want to understand where you stand and what has to happen next for you to get hired. You don't ever want to leave a job wondering when you'll get a phone call, when they'll follow up, when they'll make their decision. So asking this question is going to help you get that information. And they're likely going to tell you some things like, well, we have a few more people to interview. You'll hear by this date. You'd need to come back in for another interview. But at least you'll have that information. You won't be staring at the phone or staring at your email and wondering whether or not you got the job. The other great thing about that is that if they give you a date or a deadline and it comes and goes, you now have a valid reason to follow up with them and say, you know, when we spoke in the interview, you mentioned this would be the next step. That date's come and gone. Is there anything else I can do to further my candidacy? So this is a really important question for you to ask for your own peace of mind. At the same time, it's going to give you a sense of how structured this company is and really how well thought out their own hiring process is, so that you can get a clear sense of whether or not they're the kind of company you want to work for. There you have it, the 4 C's: connect, culture, challenges, and close. And with 2 questions apiece, that creates 8 super smart questions you should be asking hiring managers in your next job interview. Okay, so now that you've got the 8 questions I've given you, I want to hear from you.
All right. I think a lot of really good stuff in there in regards to preparing those conversations. You don't have to go, of course, line by line or ask every single one of those questions, but it gives you a good frame of context, right, on what, you know, could help you understand a little bit more about an organization, and as well, they can understand a little bit more about what's important to you, right? Like these are very, very important things, right? As you're evaluating a new opportunity. Good questions, of course, to ask, right? Initially, why is the position open? Right. Again, each step of the way, you're looking to gain additional information around this organization and the open role. Why is this position open? Is it a backfill? Is it a net new position? Is it because of growth? Right? Is it because of somebody leaving? Why did they leave? Right? Who will the role report into? What does growth potentially look like? You know, that's a question that you could ask for both the initial recruiter and or the potential supervisor. You know, what is the makeup of the team? How do they play with others? Right? Like how was feedback delivered? What does a one-on-one situation look like? You know, like what all these types of things are great questions and understanding, because your goal is to grow, right? You want to find a place where you can not just contribute and make impact, but also scale, right? Like you want to help the company scale, but you also want to help yourself scale. If you're doing the same thing a year from now, did you get the right role, right? Probably not, right? Like you want to be able to get an opportunity to where you can take on more meaningful work over time. It doesn't happen in 2 weeks, right? It takes time to get to that point, but you want to put yourself in an environment where they're interested in making that investment and having those conversations, right? To make you a better employee, right? That's, again, ideal. These are just generic prep for interviews. You know, I do think it is good to ask, even in the times of video interviews, what do people wear, right? Like I often, I had a conversation the other day. I talked to a woman. It was the first time that I'd spoken with her. It was an interview. It was for my team, and she was dressed to the nines, right? Like I was very impressed. Like she looked great, and I realized I'm like, I'm wearing a t-shirt and a ball cap, right? And granted, we're a startup, right? We're well funded and we're success. We've been around for a while, but probably not appropriate for me to have taken the interview that way, right? Like I probably should have maybe up leveled a little bit, and she probably should have looked a little bit too to say, hey, they're not a banking environment, right? Like I don't need to have that suit on. Like there was probably a mismatch there, but know a little bit about your organization, dress to the occasion, right? Or ask, you know, when you are going for an on-site interview or maybe a bigger interview, like what's appropriate? Ask your recruiter, right? Ask the hiring manager. It's like, hey, I don't know. I'm still trying to learn things. I don't know what's appropriate for your organization, but I want to make sure I put my best foot forward, right? If I wear a suit, that's probably too much, right? Or is it? Like I don't know. Get an understanding. Definitely understand who you're going to be meeting with, and how you're going to be meeting them. Like it's good to know what the interview format is going to be, right? So you can best prepare, right? And as well, adjust on the fly if need be. It's always good to ask your recruiter or initial contact, you know, like, hey, anything you can share for me, but definitely do the time to conduct some research, do some LinkedIn stalking. Every time I step into an interview, an hour before that interview, I go onto LinkedIn, right? And I just say, who looked at my profile? Did this person actually look at my profile? Do they want to know who I am, right? It is worthwhile to do some research to know who you are, right? And also for you to know who you're going to be talking to. We talked about some of this stuff before, right? Understand your environment, work off cues from the people you meet. There are some things that are no-nos, right? Employers cannot ask about certain things. And if they do, you know, defer. Sorry, no, I don't feel comfortable, or it's not appropriate for me to answer that question. It is. If they dig on that, like if they dig into to any of these things, you know, say, you know what, maybe it's not the right place for you to work, right? Because these aren't things that are legally allowed for someone to ask about. Your marital status, if you're pregnant or anticipating becoming pregnant, right? Citizenship, right? Age, sexual preference or orientation, military status, religion or ethnicity. They can't ask about these things. They can't, right? It is illegal, right? That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Unfortunately, it does. And if it does, defer, right? And if they don't defer, then they're answering a question for you, which is like, is this a place that I want to work, right? What to do if an employer or interviewer is rude? Unfortunately, this does happen. Thankfully, I think less and less today, but it does still happen, right? anybody that is interviewing should realize that they want the interview to go well, right? Like, I want an interview to go well. I'm spending time out of my day away from the work that I want to be doing to interview somebody to join this team. I would prefer it to be with somebody that I want on the team. I want it to go well. If you do have a combative interviewer that feels put off by what they're asked to be participating in, do your best, right? However, if it does get to the point where, you know what, I'm sorry, I don't feel like we're connecting here, you know, is there somebody else that I should be talking to? Is there a better time for us to connect? It is okay for you to say those types of things. Again, it is a two-way bi-directional conversation, and those types of attitudes during the interview process do speak some volumes about an organization, either one, about them being unprepared, or about an issue that they may have amongst their team. If it does happen and you do have to exit an interview, which hasn't happened too many times in my career, right? I would always follow up with whoever set up the interview, explain the instance or the circumstance, ask, you know, what happened. This is from your perspective, this is what happened here. I'm not sure if I want to continue or whatever. It is worthwhile to offer that feedback. Again, it doesn't normally happen, but if it does happen, don't put up with it, right? Like, you know, like at least you don't have to. Again, you are in a pretty competitive environment in regards to employment is concerned. Organizations are looking to grow and scale. You shouldn't have to put up with that, right? It speaks to who the organization is, and, you know, take that into consideration. After the interview, I am a big fan of thank you emails. I think they're great, at least to the person that scheduled, right, and set up the interview. It doesn't have to be for every interviewer, but I do think it is worthwhile to send it. If you are going to send emails to individual interviewers, make them personal versus generic. Try to throw something in there that is related to the conversation that you had. And, you know, always close it out with why. Like, why? Hey, thanks a lot. The way that you talked about, you know, this the need to redevelop the front end for this specific application greatly aligns, right, to this project that I participated in. That I feel really confident in regards to my skills, right? I think it'd be a great fit. Like, always close it out with a, hey, I'm good for this, right? And then definitely follow up with your recruiter or point of contact. Do not hesitate to follow up with them again. Do not hesitate to follow up with them again. At some point in time, number one, you should always try to, as JT had said in the email, try to hammer down and understand what the goalpost is. When should I expect? They've given you a date, work off of that date. Hey, you did not get back to me on Tuesday. I anticipated hearing back since my interview was last Wednesday. When can I hear back, right? When can I expect to hear back? If you follow up, it's like any part of the sales funnel or recruiting funnel as well. At some point in time, you've got to be, after a second or third message, say, you know, I can only guess, right, that at this point in time, the organization has moved forward without, you know, not in regards to my candidacy. I would still very much like to understand some feedback on how I can improve, right? Or what I could take away. It's always good to ask for feedback, if at all possible. Sometimes you're going to get it. Sometimes you're not. Hopefully an organization is going to be respectful of the time that you spent and give you some information, even if it's not going to be, hey, we want you on the team. All right. If you do not get chosen for a role, do not become argumentative. This is kind of a no-brainer, right? But you'd be surprised. Like, sometimes you feel you were a slam dunk. I loved everybody. Everybody loved me. Like, what the hell? No, that feedback you just gave me, it's bullshit. that is not the way that I presented myself. I should be considered for this job. Well, that's not going to work, right? It's not going to put a good foot forward. What I would do is like, hey, thanks a lot. You know, I'm not sure if I was able to present myself the way appropriately. I appreciate that feedback. Hopefully, you know, I can put myself in a better foot or a better position moving forward. If they do give you specific feedback, this was made in one of the videos earlier. It's like, it is a good way for you to follow up, not just in like, oh, hey, I didn't explain something. If it was an identified gap, like it's like, oh, hey, you didn't have enough experience with this specific framework. It's like, that's actually what we need. Well, you could follow up in 3 to 4 weeks after you've had a chance to review it, right? And maybe learn a little bit and say, hey, I had a chance to do this. If you're still on the market, if you really like that company, right? And it shows your tenacity. I've actually hired a few people over the course of my career because of that. It's like, they just didn't fit the bill for what we needed right now. They didn't have enough, right? However, they learned it like real fast, right? Or displayed the interest, right? And it's like, that goes a long way. So, try your best to be receptive to feedback as much as possible. Use it as a learning experience, right? For what might happen next. And I think that's it. I think that's all I have. I did a lot of talking. What questions are there questions that anybody has? Everybody's ready to just ace interviews? Or I just did the great job covering off on all the bases.
I got a question.
Okay.
During an interview and you're given a question that you're not too sure about, maybe how would you go about it if you weren't too sure how to answer it?
Well, let me ask this, and this is actually, I think, a prime example. It's like, I don't actually understand what you're asking, right? Can you clarify what you're asking? Like, can I make sure I understand what the question actually is?
Yeah, I guess if they were asking like a technical question, and if you didn't know how to answer it, and without kind of lying, how would you properly answer something like that?
Cool, great. Well, number one, I would always repeat the question to make sure that you do understand it. Just like hey, can you clarify just to make sure I understand what you're fully asking, right? That's always number one. See if you can uncover some more details right through that line of questioning. And then it's okay to plead ignorance. It is okay, right? If you only know so much, or I haven't had exposure to this type of solution or this type of technology quite yet, this is something of interest of mine. I'm interested in exploring, but I don't have a great way to answer it today. Can I get back to you on that? That's okay. You're all learning, right? I think during the resume prep conversation, we talked about this as well. It's better to know what you know and know what you don't know than try to talk through what you don't know like you do. Right? Because if people are going to uncover it, right? Like if you try to blow smoke and say, oh yeah, like talk out your rear, right? To try to say, hey, well, I do know about this. Well, it's not going to help your case any, right? It's like, oh, you know what? That's not something that I know, right? It is best to plead ignorance and use it as a growth moment, right? And growth opportunity than it is to try to present yourself as someone that does know it when in reality you don't. If it is an advanced concept that you're not familiar with and you try your best to guess, they're either going to see right through it, right? And be like, no, they don't know what they're talking about, right? Or you could get lucky and it's going to catch you some other time, right? I think that the best way to approach it, again, depending upon the specific question is, like, hey, I've heard of that. I'm not super familiar. If I were to make a guess, right, this is what I would say, right? But it might be best for me to kind of think through this a little bit and get back to you, right, to give you an appropriate answer. It's okay. You don't need to know everything, right? If it's a simple concept, try your best, of course, but you don't know everything. You don't, and that's okay. That's my answer, right? Like, I don't know.
Thank you.
That's it? Okay. All right. So again, Augur, I know you're going to jump in here and kind of say, hey, here's the next steps. I'm very hopeful that Josh is going to make it tomorrow. He got pulled into something he's trying to reschedule. So I'm hopeful that he's going to join in. If not, we might have to add somebody else in, or possibly, and I know that we don't have a lot of time here left in the cohort, right? So possibly look to another day to make sure that you get what I would like, right, in regards to the curriculum around technical interviewing. So you'll see me tomorrow one way or the other, right? At least for a few minutes, but hopefully with Josh, if not somebody else in tow.
Gotcha. All right. Appreciate it, James. Yeah, definitely. Hopefully we could get a good technical interview session. Yeah, our students have mock interview day on Wednesday. So I think all these tips will be relevant real soon. All right, cool. Thanks so much, James Lewis. Good to see you again. And yeah, we'll see you again tomorrow, I believe.
You got it.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right, cool. So hopefully you guys kind of got some good tips there. Again, I know a lot of you guys are going to be interviewing soon. So we'll have this recording posted so you guys can kind of go over some of those tips in case you didn't catch them the first time. I guess I could stop our